Cool. Good morning. I'm Ben Savage, the CEO and founder of Veritas Automata, and this morning we're going to have our first webinar. So, give you a couple warnings. One, I'm really good at breaking tech, so don't be surprised if something goes haywire during this. And two, you're going to see this evolve as we do as we do future webinars as the year goes on. So, appreciate everyone's time this morning. Hope you all had some great holidays. Today, we're going to talk about what your data story is and how Veritas Automata can help from a business intelligence and a machine learning and GenAI perspective. So again, as I said, I'm the CEO and founder of Veritas Automata, Ben Savage. We'd love to have a conversation with you. So if you scan this QR code, you can book a meeting with myself and my team on what can we do to help you solve your problems and help you create some advantages for your industry. So as I mentioned, we're Veritas Automata. Our name is Truth or Trust in Automation. We love solving really complex technical problems. Our background, where we cut our teeth, and we'll talk about this at the end, is that we come from a heavy IoT-based space where we have hundreds of thousands of devices that are emitting tons and tons of data that we have to get really good at how do we create analytics for, and machine learning and Gen AI solutions to go work from. So as we look at that, we're looking at how do we help you solve to create a competitive alpha or a competitive advantage in your industry so you can move faster, more efficiently than your competition can. And we want to bring some of that hard-won knowledge that we've developed and help you. So as we get into what we're going to talk about today, when we like to think about data as telling a story, right? So as we look at your business, you're going to have thousands of data points or hundreds of thousands or millions of data points that you've created. They could be customer interactions in your CRM. They could be data from your lab in a life sciences environment. They could be different patient records from a healthcare solution. They could be different lab events that you've gone through. All those start to tell a story as you start to weave them all together. And the first piece of that is the foundation of the data you have. And we're going to talk about that as in our methodologies on how important prepping and getting that data ready is. The next step is layering on top of it the business analytics, which are how you create visibility to those different data points. This is where you start to begin to take that data and transform it into knowledge, right? Because a bunch of raw data points don't do you any good. And we like to do this in a couple of ways from a business analytics perspective. We like to use Power BI because we love the Microsoft ecosystem, and we like to use Apache Superset. Apache Superset is an open source tool that has many of the same capabilities as Power BI, but allows you to run it local or in your own environment. Once we've got the basics of having your data prepped and having those basic analytics, because we know what data is important to you, we like to start to layer in some machine learning and Gen AI. So today we're going to dive deeper into the business analytics. Then we're going to talk about Gen AI. And we'll talk about how we have programs that can help in both scenarios, depending on where you are in your journey and what kind of help your business would need to grow to the next step. So why does all of this matter? This matters because as a business, you're looking to create efficiency, which could be cost savings, or it could be helping you grow faster with adding less resources, or you're looking to drive revenue growth. Revenue growth would be taking your data and finding new ways to monetize and new ways to integrate into your solutions that create new value for your customers that allow you to go sell more of what your business does. We love to help in both scenarios. We've got deep teams that are focused in helping with that operational efficiency point, and we've got innovation teams that are great at looking at your data and helping you figure out what can you do that you haven't been able to do before that might create new monetary channels. So we're going to dive into the business analytics now, and this can be as simple as dashboarding, and it can be as complex as when we get into the AI and the ML pieces. So when we think about business intelligence, one of the first things we start to think about is the data security layer of it, right? This is one of the challenges as you're building reports. It's really easy to go build a report and have it have lots of pretty pictures, but what happens when someone who isn't supposed to has access to it? Particularly when you're in a controlled environment, such as a life science or healthcare space, you want to make sure that you're able to have row level and RBOC style protection so that you can make sure that the right people see the right data and you don't have to deal with any HIPAA or any other compliance issues. But the most important piece, once you figured out the data security, is how do you make sure that these tools are configured to be optimized for your business, right? That they're going to show the KPIs you need. If you need custom reports, if you need custom features built in, how do you go build those integrations? Whether they're for Power BI or for Superset, that's where I think the fun really happens with these, right? It's one thing to drop it on and start to show some basics. The next thing is how do you make these reports so they drive true business value for what you're trying to do. So I mentioned in the data security, we talked about compliance, right? That's something we spend a lot of time thinking about with these systems, because once you start to create a solution where you now have all your data in one place and you're starting to create this reporting, you've got to make sure that the right people can see the right data, you're not leaking data out in the wrong ways, and that you're able to use your data in a way that's valuable, but not putting your business at risk. And then the last piece is, how do we do this all by creating trust and confidentiality in the data? So the trust piece comes from, how do we vet the data before it's put into the system so that we know good data is going in? Because if you input garbage data, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. And then how are we making sure that the data, when it comes for the output from the reports, still validates to what that original data was put in? And that's a big part of when we design these programs, of how do we build all that testing and that supportability for it. So I mentioned Power BI. That's one of our favorite tools in the Microsoft stack. So as we think about this, Power BI has some really cool features as we haven't used it, right? Some people think of it as just a reporting dashboard, but it's got a little more power than that. It's got some ability to do some ETL-like functions. So you can bring in data that's not in your core databases. It might be in Excel, it might be in a URL you need to go pull data from. And you can do this many times without a data analyst. You may need a data analyst in some scenarios, but a lot of times your basic business users can do this kind of functionality. And then you can do this more integrated, so it's showing, even in Teams, it's showing those dashboards in real time. So where you're working with your team and where you're interacting with people, you can see data. You don't have to go pop out to a separate website or a separate application. Or if you're a PowerPoint user, you can integrate real-time data with them. We use this internally with the teams quite a bit, whether that's showing different financial data so you can go see it, or we're looking at marketing data and seeing real-time data coming from our websites, or we're looking at some of our talent and people teams to see what are we doing from our retention, from our recruiting processes and all that. So we can build all that into PowerPoint or into Teams with Power BI. One of the other awesome things is Power BI snaps right into your existing Azure M365 and D365 security models. So you don't have to go redo all of those. Whereas if you're using an outside database, sometimes you have to go build all of that, which can add a little bit of complexity to it. And then Power BI has the ability to pull in a lot of the Azure AI functions. That's why in our world, analytics and GenAI and machine learning aren't all that separated anymore. They're becoming closer and closer together as we think about these. So that quick checklist, if you're thinking about Power BI, are you a Microsoft-centric organization, or are you interested in moving that way? Because if you are, this is a really incredible tool you can pull in. Do you already leverage Azure and M365 and D365? Or are you looking at creating a one lake data lake so you've got a central reporting pieces? This is what we either like to help customers create if they're not already with all these pieces, or we can leverage if they have them so they can create their reporting and their analytics faster. Now, if you're in an environment where you aren't Microsoft centric, or you have more flexibility that you need, or you want to control everything, you want to host it in your own data center or in your own cloud environment without having that data go out to another third-party system, this is where we like Superset. Superset is very good at their reporting and analytics. It doesn't have some of the same ETL functions built into it. There are ways that we can help you either leverage your existing data mart and lake and ETL infrastructure with this tool, or we can bring additional tools in to help you build those capabilities so you can get the equivalent functionality. The other thing is, depending on where your data is and you want more flexibility, this gives you some ability to connect to different data sources than we might otherwise with Power BI. And then the last piece is, if you want to completely bring your own AI insight tools or have custom tools created where it's on just your data, this is where we can leverage Superset. So again, that quick checklist, if it's not Microsoft centric or you want to run on-prem, that's where Superset is a good fit for what you're looking for. If you already have your existing data sources, again, Superset's a good fit. And the last piece is, if you want to integrate with tools like Slack or Mattermost or some of the other communication platforms, that's where Superset can be useful for you. So as we think about these, what is our methodology for this? This is really the heart of it, right? For us, we're kind of indifferent to the tool. That's really based on what the customer's environment is best suited for. But the important piece is the way we approach it. And the first thing is sitting and doing a discovery process. That's our phase one. It's sitting and talking with you, identifying what are your data sources, what data is important, what data might you be missing that you need some ability to create reporting on. So that's really where we're going to ask you about your KPIs. What do you want to track? What do you track today, and what do you aspirationally need to track? How is your data structured? Where is it? What are the security rules? And that's phase one, where we're going to have a plan so we can start to prep all your data for phase two. Because I mentioned earlier, if you don't have good data going into these systems, you're going to get bad data going out. If you don't have the right relationship set up between your tables or however your data is interconnected, and those right data models, you're going to be able to get some really interesting answers that may mean nothing. And that's where we want to sit and work with you to make sure the data's prepped. Then we go through and we build those initial prototype dashboards. So we're working with your teams to say, okay, here's one. How does this look? Does it have the right look and feel? Do we have the right KPIs? What does the next dashboard look like? And then we go launch them into production after they've been validated and tested, right? That was one of the things that we talked about, that trust and confidentiality. We want to make sure that only the right data is being shown on these, that they're consistent, that they're reproducible or repeatable. That's what phase three is all about. And that's why we do that before we go into phase four. And this is our standard process for any customers. We like to start with one or two dashboards at first with you to make sure that we all have the right agreement on the data and we can create the right models for you. And then we like to go into production and help you with as many, or teach your team to build as many dashboards with the tooling as possible. So you're going to see me now shift topics slightly. And what I'm going to do is go into the AI piece of what we're going to talk about, because this becomes the way you superpower those different dashboards, right? So you get the data prepped, you build the dashboard. Now you want to start to have automatic insights coming in beyond just what a system can do on its own. This is where we move into artificial intelligence. So as we think about what your data story is from a Gen AI perspective or artificial intelligence, there's really two pieces we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about Azure Generative AI, and that breaks into use of public models and use to private subscriptions. And then we're going to talk about private generative AI. This is where you would host everything in your own infrastructure. So as we go into this, it's one of the things I find is increasingly important is let's level set. When we talk about AI, what's the difference between that word I was using earlier, Gen AI, and machine learning? So machine learning are deterministic, consistent, repeatable algorithms that are usually focused around finding patterns, right? They're either going to find a known pattern or they're going to find the absence of a known pattern. And those are going to be what trigger automatic alerts. The beautiful thing is you can train these based on your data. There are tools within Azure where we can leverage their existing APIs and some of their frameworks as well to help with this. And now you're able to have an algorithm that's bespoke to what you need to do for a detection perspective. So if I give some examples, so I mentioned that they're either looking for a known pattern or the absence of a known pattern, right? In finance, you think about fraud detection on your credit card. There, you're training the algorithm on what is good data for that particular credit card provider, and sometimes even that particular user. And when you see transactions that are anomalous, then you flag an error because it's not what the normal pattern is. So let's think about, I am normally based in Ohio and I go within a 100-mile range, and all of a sudden it shows me in Kiev, Russia. That's probably a little bit of a suspicious transaction, particularly if it happens 5 minutes after I've done a transaction at a gas pump in Ohio. So that's the kind of system you would trigger an alert for. Or if we think about healthcare and we think about using image detection for looking at some kind of scan, whether it's a CT, an X-ray, or even a sample biopsy, right? You're looking at it and you're looking at that for a set of known patterns that say this is a problematic set of cells. So you've trained it for that. You can feed the same data in. You will always get the same result out. In autonomous cars, it's all about image recognition. So there it's about recognizing the sign or the vehicle in front of you and being able to tell where and when it's going somewhere. And we talked about image recognition. That's one we've actually done a ton of interesting projects on. And when we do the next webinar, we'll probably dive into one of those, where we've got a system that is taking images real time from an IoT device. It's making decisions at the edge. It's then sending that transaction data to the cloud, and we're finalizing the transaction in the cloud. But there, it's looking for against a known pattern. It's determining if there's something present in that particular IoT scenario, and then it's saying, yep, this is good, or nope, this is bad. So now I'm going to shift back into my conversation about the LLMs, because I think this is important, right? We talked about what is conventional machine learning. So let's talk about conventional LLMs. And when we look at those, an LLM is in this case, we're going to say it fits into that generative pre-trained transformer type system. I can now use these when they are hosted in the cloud, or I can use them as open source. When I'm using them hosted in the cloud, there's really two ways we can do this. This is what I talked about earlier with the Azure. where I can use the subscription models that I can get from OpenAI and from Azure themselves, and I can get my own instances of them, or I can use a truly open source one. If I'm using the public ones, if I'm just using ChatGPT, look at your terms of service. You may have some issues with data leakage with that. If I use a subscription with that, now I've got some better controls over that. From my data leakage, the data inputs and the data outputs, I still may have an opportunity where they can change or update the model on me where I don't have control over that. Whereas when I use an open source model, I'm going to trade off a little bit of the capacity and the ability to generate broad responses that I get in the open source, in the commercial source models for the open source, where it's smaller, it's less parameters. So I might be 400 or 500 billion parameters for ChatGPT, or more than that. It might be in the millions. That they haven't published what some of their most recent ones are. And I might be using a 70V model on the open source side. That's going to give me some difference in the ability for it to respond. But when I use the open source one, I have control. I can make sure that model only updates when I intend for it to update. And I can make sure that I've put all my own safety and controls around it that I may not be able to do with the public source one. I can also make sure in the open source one that I am entirely controlling who can get access to it and where the responses go. So that's a choice, either good or bad. It's just a choice you need to think about as you're thinking about your data. So back to the overview of the generative AI. When we think about these, it's kind of what I was talking about on that first slide, right? Data security is one of the first things that we want to talk about with people. What data is important for your business to go protect? And then what data is okay if it gets into different places? The next piece is, how much customization or adaptation are you going to need? Are you going to need a completely custom model? Are you going to need to just use retrieval augmented generation? Or can you just use a pure model out in the cloud? Depending on what your use case is, all three of those may be valid answers. The next piece is compliance. And that's kind of related to data security in a lot of ways, right? What data do you have to make sure that you have absolute control over to make sure you're within whatever compliance regimes that you have to participate in, right? HIPAA, PII, other patient safety data that you need to think about. And the last piece, this is the most complicated piece with LLM type solutions, right? Maintaining that trust and confidentiality. How do you make sure this model is trustworthy, right? How do you make sure that you have the ability to know that when you get an output, it's going to be generally what you expect? This is going to be a challenge with large language models. They are non-deterministic. You are not guaranteed to always get the same answer every time. You may get different variations of the answer. And so then it becomes incumbent on the team, whoever's building the solution, to put in different guardrails to either make sure it's a valid answer, or if it's too risky an answer or something like that, to make sure that they don't come in. Another example of this is that answer even appropriate to come out? We were doing some work with some FDA clinical trial data to test some of the LLMs, and we had the system working really well. You could ask it a question, get a response on different cancer studies. And then someone said, what happens if I ask it to summarize this in the terms of a rock song? Amusing idea if you're just playing on your own, but if you're giving terminal cancer data, maybe not the best way. We had to engineer that out of the system. So that's something to think about as we work through this. So one of the things that we like is kind of a middle ground, right? I talked about the public APIs and I talked about the private, is the newer solutions that have come out from particularly Microsoft, and AWS has started to bring some of these as well, where you can get access to your own instance of a LLM, whether that's OpenAI or Microsoft Phi or one of those solutions. And then you have your own ability to query it. It keeps your data safe. It keeps it in the cloud. You have some more cost controls if you're using an open source model in your own infrastructure. This is a pretty good solution, though, if you want to baby step and don't want to go invest in infrastructure to get started. The one challenge is sometimes they can change models up on you with this, but this gets you kind of the best of both worlds to start. So as I did a similar deep breakdown with the way we think about projects for the analytics, we think about the project for a large language model type project or custom machine learning the same way, right? The first thing is spending a lot of time doing discovery and design. We want to know what's important to you, what is your data, what are the things that you want to build automated insights on? And then the next phase is to start prepping everything, right? And a lot of this is going to go into data preparation. And particularly with machine learning and somewhat with Gen AI, this may actually be the longest piece of the project, just so people are prepared for that. Make sure that data is ready and in a good state, because you cannot train a machine learning algorithm without your good data. And if you put bad data even into an LLM, you're going to get answers, but you don't know if they're valid or not. So this is one of the most important pieces. The next thing is to do the model tuning and integration. And I kind of moved through it pretty rapidly in the early part I was talking about with LLMs, but there's really three approaches to using these models, right? You can use a raw large language model, just throw questions and throw data in, and you can do that all with prompt engineering. You can fine tune it, which is where you train your own data into it. And particularly if you use smaller models, that can be really valuable for a business. That's much faster than going through and trying to train a whole large model that's equivalent to OpenAI. Or you can use retrieval augmented generation, where think of that as kind of a supercharged search slash autocorrect kind of built together into a model. So what that lets you do is go through your data, give specific references to it when it finds it. So now I can say, how do I go do function X? And it will give you a link directly back to the manual where it got that, or directly back to the support. And these are the kind of tools we're seeing a lot of value in right now, because they take known business data, make it easy for your team, say through a Teams or through a Slack or through a Mattermost chat system, to be able to go quickly get that answer versus have to go pull tons of things. This is kind of what we were doing with some of that FDA data I talked about, right? So now you can go through, you've got the library of all the different protocols that you've used, and you can go ask it a question. What did we use for the last 4 cancer protocols? And now you can go quickly get that data where you can go translate that into something you can go do. So once you've got everything integrated, now you start to go build everything, get it all tied together with your different chat with everything. And then the next piece really is the testing. This is one of the things that we've got a couple of members on our team who focus on what we call red teaming. So this is where we're not only looking for what should the system do and what is it intended to do, but what are the things it shouldn't do? How do we make sure you can't jailbreak it, right? There was a new jailbreak that just came out from Anthropic, what was that? The week before Christmas. And it was just, if you start to play with case, it would have the model, and it would something the model knew it wasn't supposed to tell you if you just went and asked it a normal sentence. If you messed up the case and put a couple numbers in instead of letters and spoke like a hacker, it would sometimes give you an answer. Well, that's maybe not ideal in a lot of cases, right? So the team looked at that very quickly, built that into some of our tooling that we use to build these kind of projects. So now we know we've defended against it. And so we're always looking at what should the model be asked and what shouldn't it be asked and it shouldn't respond to. That's another piece that's complicated, right? It's kind of prepping the data and making sure all of that's there before you go roll that out as a POC to the rest of your team. Because the one thing we know with these tools, as soon as you give people access to them, they're going to ask them questions. They're going to ask them good questions, and they're going to ask them bad questions. So how do you make sure you're prepared for all that? So that's how we approach these projects. You see, it's very similar to the way we do analytics, very focused on the quality of the data and what the outcomes, the intended outcomes are. And then we do through the rest of the development and the testing to make sure it's going to meet those goals. So just to kind of tie it all back to where we started, this is all about how do we drive a tangible return on investment for your business, whether we're helping you drive cost savings or helping you create the ability to scale faster with less people and less tech investment, or we're helping you create new revenue growth opportunities, right? We're taking your data and we're helping you monetize it in a different way because we're able to surface it in a way that now your team can go back and sell additional features to customers, or you can use that data to create value so the customers see more value in what you're trying to sell them. Those are the kind of things our team is really focused on when we look at data. So just as a reminder who we are, we're Veritas Automata. You can translate that as trusted or truth in automation. And we're really focused on how do we help you solve those complex automation problems that keep you up at night, right? The other piece that's closely related to that in our world is digital and physical chain of custody. Why do I relate those two things? Well, if I'm going to have trusted data, I have to know where it came from, I have to know how it got in the system, and I have to know what I need to do with it next. And I need to be able to verify that chain of custody. Where did the data enter? What is everything we did to it? So that way, when you get the output, you know it's a valid output for the system. And we do that sometimes using IoT devices, but a lot of times it's just digitally with software in the cloud. So our team is a bunch of mad scientists, product engineers, managers, and project managers, and creative problem solvers. And what we've done over the past is we've built complex CRO systems for our customers. We've built complex IoT systems for our customers. And all of those help generate real value for them to move their business forward. And that's what we like to do, right? We like those complex problems that nobody has an easy answer to, and we can sit there and go, let's think about it for a minute. And there's always an answer. So when we look at our team's core capabilities, we're deep into the Microsoft ecosystem as a Microsoft partner. So we love to work in Azure and the .NET ecosystem. And we'll do that both on-prem or off-prem in the cloud. And then we'll also help you take those old applications and modernize them, right? That's one of the things that happens a lot of times. You've got a 10-year-old application, a 15-year-old application. It was written in .NET when it first came out in C#, and you've been there and maybe it's still running on a local server. You want to modernize it and bring it into the modern world using the Azure functions as a service and all of those other pieces so you can get the value of some of the new technology. We'd love to help with those programs in addition to just doing brand new application development. I already mentioned about the digital chain of custody. And then we love to help create innovative solutions for our partners. We love a challenge. I was talking with someone the other day, and they were throwing us a couple of new ones that we're really excited about using actually GenAI with voice prompting and saying, how can we create some specific solutions for them? So just as a reminder, you can scan this QR code and you can schedule a meeting with our team. We'd love to talk and say, how can we help you create a competitive advantage for your business and increase the alpha of your business? So we're excited to follow up with you. So please do.